I want to start today with something that is going to sound completely backwards. And I need you to stay with me for a moment, because when I first explain this, your instinct is going to be to say, no, that can't be right, that doesn't make sense, that's too good to be true. But it is right. It does make sense once you understand the logic behind it. And it is absolutely true. I'm going to prove it to you with real numbers before this video is done. Here it is. There are Australian pensioners right now who spent money renovating their homes. New kitchen, new bathroom, new roof, new driveway. And as a direct result of spending that money, their Centrelink pension went up. Not down, up. They spent $60,000, and their fortnightly pension payment increased. Now before you say anything, no, this is not a loophole in the sense that it's going to get closed tomorrow. It is not something shady. It is not something you need to hide from Centrelink. In fact, it works precisely because of the way Centrelink's own rules are designed. And once I explain the logic, you are going to understand it completely. And then you are going to wonder why nobody ever told you this before. Stay with me, because this one is going to change the way you think about your home, your savings, and your pension. My name is your name. This is the channel where I explain the Centrelink and retirement system in plain language, the stuff that's real, the stuff that matters, and the stuff that the system does not go out of its way to explain to you. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave. And if you've got a friend or a family member on the age pension who owns their home and has savings sitting in the bank, please share this video with them. Because what I'm about to explain could genuinely put more money in their pocket every single fortnight. Right. Let's get into this properly. To understand why renovating can increase your pension, you first need to understand two things about how Centrelink works: the assets test and the family home exemption. And I'm going to explain both of them in a way that actually makes sense. The assets test is how Centrelink decides how much pension you receive. They look at everything you own: your savings, your shares, your car, your caravan, your investment properties, your superannuation, and they add it all up. If your total assets are below a certain threshold, you get the full pension. As your assets climb above that threshold, your pension reduces. And once your assets cross the upper cutoff point, your pension stops entirely. As of 2026, a single homeowner loses their pension entirely once their assets exceed approximately $686,000. For a couple who own their home, that upper limit is around $1,031,000. Below those numbers, you receive some pension. Above them, nothing. Now here is the second piece: the family home exemption. The home you live in, your principal residence, is completely excluded from the assets test. It does not count. Centrelink does not care how much it is worth. Whether your home is worth $400,000 or $2 million, it is invisible to the assets test. It simply does not exist as far as your pension calculation goes. Are you starting to see where this is going? Let me make it concrete with a real example. Meet Barbara. Barbara is 71, single, owns her home in regional New South Wales. Her home is worth around $550,000. It does not count toward her assets. Good. But Barbara also has $420,000 sitting in the bank. Term deposits, a cash management account, some shares. That $420,000 absolutely counts toward her assets test. And at $420,000, she is over the threshold for a single homeowner, which means her pension is reduced. She's not cut off entirely, but she's getting significantly less than the full rate. Barbara's house is getting old. The kitchen was last updated in 1987. The bathroom tiles are cracked. The roof has been patched twice and needs to be done properly. Barbara has been putting it off because she doesn't want to spend the money. In her mind, spending $80,000 on renovations feels like losing $80,000. But here is what Barbara hasn't been told. If she spends $80,000 from her bank account on renovating her home, two things happen simultaneously. Her assessable assets go down by $80,000, because the cash leaves her account, and the value added to her home by those renovations goes up. But because the home is exempt, Centerlink doesn't count any of it. The $80,000 effectively moves from the assessed column to the invisible column, from a place where Centerlink can see it and count it against her, to a place where Centerlink cannot touch it at all. And as a result of her assessable assets dropping by $80,000, Barbara's pension goes up. She spent money. Her pension increased. And she got a new kitchen, a new bathroom, and a roof that isn't going to leak on her in winter. That is the loophole. That is the logic. And it is completely legal, completely above board, and it works because of the way the rules are deliberately designed. Now I want to be very clear about something here. I am not suggesting that people should renovate purely for the purpose of increasing their pension. I am saying that if you were already planning to renovate, if you have been putting it off, if the house needs work, if you have been sitting on savings and wondering whether to spend them or keep them, the pension impact of that decision is something you absolutely should factor in. Because most people don't. And not factoring it in is costing them money every single fortnight. Let me show you what that looks like in actual dollar terms. Barbara had $420,000 in assessable assets. The assets test for a single homeowner in 2026 reduces the pension by $3 for every $1,000 in assets above the lower threshold of approximately $314,000. So Barbara's assets were $106,000 above that lower threshold. That means her pension was being reduced by $318 per fortnight, every single fortnight. After spending $80,000 on renovations, her assessable assets dropped to $340,000. She is now only $26,000 above the lower threshold. Her pension reduction drops to $78 per fortnight. She went from a reduction of $318 per fortnight to a reduction of $78 per fortnight. That is $240 more in her pocket every single fortnight. That is $6,240 more per year, every year, for the rest of her life on the pension. She spent $80,000, but at $6,240 extra per year, she effectively earns that money back in just under 13 years of additional pension. And she has a renovated home that is more comfortable, more energy efficient, more livable, and worth more if she ever does decide to sell. Now some of you are doing the maths in your head right now and thinking, okay, but if I spend all my savings, I won't have anything left for emergencies, and that is a completely valid concern. This is not about spending every dollar you have on renovations. It is about being strategic, about understanding that if you have savings sitting in the bank above your pension threshold, savings that are actively reducing your fortnightly payment, and you have genuine home maintenance or improvement needs, the financially smart move may be to do those renovations sooner rather than later. The savings don't disappear, they transform. From cash that Centerlink counts, to equity in a home that Centerlink ignores. Now let me take this further. Because it's not just renovations, the same logic applies to any spending that improves or maintains your principal home. New solar panels, exempt once installed. New hot water system, exempt. Air conditioning, exempt. Insulation, fencing, decking, new flooring, disability modifications like grab rails and ramps, all of it, once it becomes part of the home, is absorbed into an asset that Centerlink cannot touch. This is also why financial advisors who understand the pension rules sometimes talk about what they call asset optimization for pensioners. The idea is simple. Before you hit pension age, or once you're on the pension, you look at where your money is sitting. If you have money in assessable assets that is pushing you over the threshold, and you have genuine needs that could be met by spending some of that money on your home, you match the two together. You spend on the home. Your assessable assets drop. Your pension increases. And you are left with a better home and a better income. Now I want to flag something important. Because there is a version of this that goes wrong. And I want to make sure you don't fall into it. The exemption applies to your principal home, the home you live in. It does not apply to investment properties. It does not apply to a holiday house. It does not apply to a granny flat that you rent out to someone. If you spend money renovating a property that is not your principal residence, that spending does not reduce your assessable assets in the same way, because the investment property itself is already a fully assessable asset. You would just be improving the value of something Centrelink is already counting against you. Also, and this matters, large cash payments to family members dressed up as home improvements are not what I am describing. Centrelink is not naive. If you claim to have spent $150,000 on a renovation and there are no receipts, no invoices, no evidence of any actual work, that is going to create a very different kind of conversation with Centrelink. Keep your receipts, keep your invoices, keep the paperwork from your tradies. If Centrelink ever asks you to account for where your assets went, the paper trail is your protection. Now let me talk about the people this matters most for. Because not everyone is in Barbara's situation, and I want to be honest about who this actually helps. This matters most for people who are sitting just above the pension assets threshold with money in the bank, who own their home, and who have genuine maintenance or improvement needs they have been putting off. If that is you, if you have been looking at your cracked bathroom tiles, or your drafty windows, or your aging hot water system, and thinking I'll get to it eventually, this video is your sign to get to it now. Because every fortnight you wait is a fortnight of reduced pension that you don't need to be losing. It also matters for people who are approaching pension age with savings above the threshold. If you know you are going to apply for the pension in the next year or two, and your home needs work, doing that work now, while you are planning your financial position before the application, is a very smart move. You reduce your assessable assets before Centrelink ever starts assessing you. You go in with a cleaner picture, and you get the full pension, or closer to it, from day one. And it matters for people who are on a reduced pension and don't understand why. If you are receiving less than the full rate, and you have savings sitting in the bank, and your home needs work, this is the conversation you need to have with a financial advisor. Because the maths might be in your favor, and you just haven't run them yet. Now I also want to mention prepayment of expenses, because it connects to the same logic. Centrelink allows pensioners to prepay certain expenses in a way that reduces their assessable assets. Paying 2 years of home and contents insurance up front, paying 2 years of rates in advance, prepaying a funeral plan, which is a very common strategy and completely above board. These are all ways of converting assessable cash into non-assessable spending, which reduces your asset position and can increase your pension. Funeral bonds and prepaid funeral plans in particular have become a well-known strategy among pension planning professionals, because Centrelink allows up to a certain value to be held in a funeral bond that is completely exempt from the assets test. As of 2026, that exempt amount is around $15,000. It's not a massive number, but combined with other strategies, it is part of a picture. I want to come back to Barbara one more time, because there's an ending to her story that I want you to hear. Barbara did the renovations. New kitchen, new bathroom, the roof sorted properly at last. She spent $83,000 in total over about 4 months. She used a local builder she trusted, kept every invoice, and reported the change in her assets to Centrelink when the work was done. Her pension increased by $228 per fortnight. Not quite the full $240 I calculated earlier. Her exact numbers landed slightly differently, but $228 more every single fortnight from that point forward. When her daughter came to visit and saw the new kitchen, she cried. Not because of the kitchen, because her mum had been living with a broken range hood and a bathroom with no hot water pressure for 3 years, because she thought she couldn't afford to fix it. She had over $400,000 in the bank. She thought she couldn't afford it. She could afford it. She just didn't know that spending it was going to make her pension go up. That daughter rang me. Well, not me specifically, but you understand what I mean. And she said, "Why does nobody explain this? Why do they let people sit in uncomfortable homes with money in the bank that they're afraid to touch, when spending that money would actually make their pension better? I don't have a satisfying answer to that question. The information is technically available. The rules are publicly documented. But there is a very big difference between information that exists and information that reaches the person who needs it. And that gap is exactly why I sit down and make these videos every week. If this one helped you, if it changed the way you are thinking about your savings, your home, and your pension, then please share it before you close this tab. Send it to someone you know who owns their home and is on the pension. Put it in a seniors group. Text it to your brother or your neighbor or your friend who has been putting off that bathroom renovation for 5 years. Because somewhere in your circle right now, there is a person sitting in a home that needs work, with money in the bank they are afraid to spend, getting less pension than they should be. And they don't know that those two things are connected. But you do now. And a share from you could fix that for them. Hit the like button if this made sense. Subscribe if you want to keep getting this kind of information. Honest, plain language, no scare tactics, just the real stuff. And turn on the bell, because next time I'm going to cover something that has been coming up constantly in my comments. What triggers a Centrelink review of your assets? What happens during one? And what you are actually allowed to say and do when it happens. That one is important. I'll see you there.